My talk tonight is on cream and bread. And it's going to be easier here because I don't have to spin around and show things to everybody. And cream and bread seems to me to be a Scandinavian, American Scandinavian tradition. And as we Americans become more and more a part of the melting pot, we find that we are gradually losing much of the ethnic heritage we so fondly remember. So just like the hearty suppertime concoction of rich cream and brown sugar on freshly baked bread that we enjoyed in the 40s and 50s, this book is our savory concoction of reminiscence of those bygone days in rural Scandinavian homes with our Scandinavian Lutheran traditions. And we don't make a fuss to feed all of us. We'll just have cream and bread. And then I found this book, The Swedes in Sweden. I thought it was going to be like a kid's book or something, you know, but it's not. What is a Swede? Swede is slang for girl, the sort of sweet, lively, lovely girl that abounds so bountifully in Sweden. And they are girls naturally sweet, not sweetened artificially, no powder or paint, beauty doctors, cosmetic shops. They never heard of them. Such is the naive innocence of the Swede in Sweden. If she is a beauty, she didn't try to be, and she doesn't even know it. It was nature that did it. The glorious Swedish sunshine, the great snows, the canoeing on the lakes in summer, the skiing in the winter, the good Swedish smorgasbord, the wholesome Swedish milk, the sturdy Swedish parentage, the cultural atmosphere of a proper Swedish home, a sweet Swedish disposition, the total lack of all artificialities, toilet, deceits, worldly sophistication. There you have the composite Swedish sweetie. And it's kind of like a travel book. It's really interesting. And then and I have this old recipe book that I found an error in there on Swedish meatballs. It says beat egg, add bread and milk. Well, they don't have on the ingredients the egg or the milk. How many eggs do you put in? What size? How much milk? It seems so strange to me. And then a couple of little interesting notes. If a cracked dish is boiled for 45 minutes in sweet milk, the crack will be so welded together that it will hardly be visible. It will be so strong it will stand the same usage as before. And if you add a little milk to water in which cauliflower is cooking, the cauliflower will remain attractively white. And then there's this book on home canning. Milk is in here. After straining the fresh milk, which this is, you've got to get it straight from a cow for this, allow it to stand until animal heat disappears. Pour into clean curd jars to within a ½ inch of top of jar. Put on cap, screwing the band tight. Process in pressure cooker 10 minutes at 10 pounds pressure. And then there was this, I found a recipe for spiced sour milk cake. And I was like, I always wondered, how do you make sour milk? Do you just let it age? No. To sour milk, pour 1 tablespoon vinegar into a 1 cup measuring cup. Fill with sweet milk. Let stand a few minutes. And then here's another hint. How to whip evaporated milk. This is from an old cookbook. Boil unopened can of evaporated milk ½ hour in water. Be sure can is always covered. Set aside and chill well and whip. Save time and heat by boiling 2 cans at once. Now some milk in Sweden is film yolk, also known as fill. It is a traditional fermented milk product from Sweden and is massively popular in Nordic countries and is starting to spread across Europe and North America. Variations of film yolk have been around for a super long time, like Viking era status. While it's come a long way since the 11th century, it's still a simple mix of milk and bacteria. It is a type of mesophilic yogurt, and that means that it is fermented at room temperature. This process creates an organic compound called diacetyl, which has a distinct buttery flavor. It's usually less sour than yogurt and has a very drinkable consistency. Swedes traditionally consume it at breakfast in place of milk. It's typically mixed with cereal or muesli or granola. And I saw this in Sweden too. Film yolk is so easy to make. All you need is milk, yogurt cultures, and thyme. You can find film yolk in stores. Siggy's is non-fat, and if you make your own, it's simple to make it richer and more satisfying. You can use skim milk, 2%, whole, and even half and half. Some believe that 2% makes the best film yolk and has taste, richness, and just the right amount of zip. And how to make sour milk, I already did that. If you are in the Nordic countries and what you want is more of our type of milk, make sure you don't get the film yolk. You might want oat milk or almond milk. And Sweden is a country that has traditionally high levels of dairy consumption. Butter, cheese, and milk are all considered essential components of a conventional Swedish breakfast and other meals throughout the day. And some creatures that produce milk, like you get the cow, and then I saw something on the internet that there's a brown cow that gives brown milk. I don't know if the buffalo, water buffalo, camel, goat, sheep, yak, horse and the donkey is the most expensive, zebra, reindeer, zebu, moose, and get ready for this, cockroach. They have the most nutrient-dense food. And you can even get milk a pig, but they don't like to be milked. And in the Netherlands, they have some farm cheese that costs $1,200 per pound. And you can even get milk from a jumping spider, but that cannot be consumed by humans. And giraffe, rhinoceros, and supposedly the black rhinoceros has black milk. I don't know, I've seen it, they've said both ways. And that they actually give skim milk. And a hippopotamus or bantha milk is supposed to be blue, but I'm not sure if that's true or not. The elephant, the eastern cottontail rabbit, which has the most protein-rich milk, and even male and female pigeons. They have crop milk, and it's secreted into a small sac at the base of their throats. And there's just so many other creatures out there that give milk. It's amazing. And have you ever heard of the European milk that is boxed and it can sit on the shelf for months? And then once you open it, then it has to be refrigerated. And it's the different pasteurization methods in the US and Canada. Milk manufacturers make use of high temperature, short time pasteurization, or HTST. Able to kill bacteria in large batches, HTST is efficient but results in milk that expires relatively quickly. And that's because the temperature used is enough to kill most bacteria, but some will proliferate if the milk hangs around long enough. And in Europe and other parts of the world, another technique called ultra-heat treated pasteurization, or UHT, is used. Milk is exposed to higher temperatures of 284 degrees Fahrenheit for 3 seconds. decimating virtually all the bacteria and making it shelf stable for about 6 months if left unopened. And because it's cooked at high heat and burns off some of the sugar, UHT milk also has a slightly different flavor, and that's why it hasn't really caught on in the United States. And plus, we're used to going to get a cold thing of milk, not on the shelf. And the Parmalat company tried a marketing campaign with Luciano Pavarotti in the early 1900s, but it may simply be too late. And you know, there's just, we like to have cold milk sitting in the fridge. And then, now on to bread. The smell of new bread is comfortable to the head and to the heart. 4 grain types dominated in the Nordic countries. Barley and rye are the oldest. Wheat and oats are more recent. During the Iron Age, rye became the most commonly used grain, as well as up until the beginning of the 20th century. Today, older grain types such as emmer and spelt are once again being cultivated, and new bread types are being developed from these grains. Scandinavian soldiers in Roman times apparently learned baking techniques when working as mercenaries in the Roman army. They then took the technique home with them to show that they had been employed in high-status work on the continent. Culturally, German traditions have influenced most of the bread types in the Nordic countries. In the eastern part of Finland, there is a cultural link to Russia and Slavic bread traditions. In the Nordic countries, bread was the main part of a meal until the late 18th century. 4 different bread regions can be found in the Nordic area in the late 19th century. In the south, soft rye bread dominated. Further north came crisp bread, usually baked with rye, then thin and crispy barley bread. In the far north, soft barley loaves dominated. During the 19th century, potatoes began to become the centerpiece of meals, and bread was put aside as an extra source of carbohydrates in a meal. Bread still retained its key function for breakfast, as the open sandwich is a starter for most Nordic people today. Since the very beginning, bread making has always been a male task and associated with high status in Sweden. And the women, they did the home baking. This was like out in the public. Bread was historically primarily served in one of 2 ways, either broken into pieces in a soup, stock, milk, or fermented milk, or dipped in a hot drink, or served in the form of butter spread on a slice of bread, and served as an open sandwich. In regions where they lacked cereals or bread, dried fish has functioned as bread. In order to make it edible, the fish was first beaten with a stone until it became soft. The fish was spread with butter and eaten like a sandwich. Northern European breads. We have the Finnish nakelipia. It's a crispy, thick flatbread that is usually prepared with rye flour. It was traditionally round, but today it appears in various forms and can be prepared with seeds and different types of flour. Flatbrød is a traditional Norwegian unleavened flatbread. This very thin and crisp bread is usually made with a combination of barley flour, salt, and water. Some people use sour milk instead of water, or a mixture of dark and white flour instead of barley flour. Kåring is a classic Swedish bread that started by traveling through the Nordic countries. It originated as a crisp rye bread in Norway, and then in the late 1800s evolved into a slightly sweet, tender, and fragrant loaf in southern Sweden. Riska is a Finnish unleavened flatbread that has been prepared across the country since ancient times. The ingredients for its preparation vary from one region to another, as do its texture and thickness, ranging from thin, crispy, and cracker-like to thick, dense, and bready. Lompe is a traditional flatbread originating from Norway, made with potatoes, salt, and water, and is similar to the more famous Lefse flatbread, although lumpy is usually smaller in diameter and is most commonly used for wrapping hot dogs into it. Tombröd is a traditional Swedish flatbread. Since it could be stored for longer periods, it was created out of necessity. Nowadays, it comes in many forms and may employ different combinations of wheat, barley, and rye, or various seeds. Pannkaka is a classic Swedish flatbread with a light, almost cake-like texture made with a combination of milk, butter, white flour, rye flour, sea salt, yeast, light syrup, and hawthorn salt, which gives the flatbread its fluffy and light texture. Hawthorn salt was originally made from deer antlers, but nowadays ammonium carbonate is used instead. Rugbrød is a brown rye bread from Denmark, typically used as a base for popular Danish open sandwiches. Usually it is sliced thinly, buttered, and topped with ingredients such as smoked fish, shrimp, boiled eggs, liver pate, cucumbers, or mayonnaise. Lefse is a traditional Norwegian flatbread, usually looking like a huge round tortilla. It comes in many varieties such as plain, sweet, thin, or thick. There is also a popular version with potatoes incorporated in the dough and is a favorite of the Telemark region. Knäckebröd is the original name of this famous Swedish crisp bread. Even though it is regarded as a bread variety, its crunchy texture and thin form have more similarities to crackers. Swedish lefse is made of wheat flour and may include butter, cream, milk, and lard, and is typically cooked on a large flat griddle and is prepared with special tools. Rolling pins with deep grooves are used to spread it out, while long wooden sticks are used to turn it. Swedish limpa bread is the classic rye bread. Unlike most other Scandinavian rye breads that are dense and savory, this is light with a fine crumb and sweet. There are different recipe variations, although most contain ingredients such as orange zest and spices, such as caraway seeds, fennel seeds, sunflower seeds, or anise seeds. Swedish vetebröd is a type of coffee bread or cake and is a sweet unleavened bread that is typically spiced with cardamom, but can also be spiced with cinnamon. And one of its most outstanding features is that its top crust is braided. Traditionally, the bread is glazed at the top with almonds and pearl sugar. Upplandskub is a unique Swedish bread from the upland part of Sweden. This bread has a unique baking method and is mostly cooked around Christmas time. It is baked in a shaped container with a lid in a warm water bath for a few hours. And then, oh, that was it, I already said that. And then we have, in this old book, they talk about quick breads, or hot breads, as they are sometimes called, are breads which may be prepared in a very short time and are intended to be served at once while they are fresh and hot. Keeping them for any length of time spoils their flavor and lightness. And then yeast breads. In these busy days, many of us buy our bread at the corner grocery because we think we have no time for bread making. But if you could be sure that within 3 hours after you had first set your dough to rise, you could take to the golden brown crusty loaves from the oven, would you be willing to bake at home? And here's a couple of nice crisp bread with the typical Scandinavian style of bread eating. And I have this that kind of had to see. This is, I believe it's Swedish. It's a tool, an old-time tool for use for bread making. And it was the poorer people would use this. I think instead of the rolling pin with the things on the rolling pin, they had this to make the holes in the bread. You can see a little bit of the holes there. I thought that was kind of cool. This is not Scandinavian, but it's an old bread that you put your dough in there to let it rise. I've had that for a long time. I thought that was good. Any questions or comments?
What do you gotta cook now?
What's what?
What do you gotta cook now?
I don't have anything to. I don't have any samples. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that.